For the things we have to learn before we can do them, we learn by doing them. Aristotle.
Maybe don't know.
This time, power. This time to build power. This time to build power. This time to build power.
Even good beta spray is bad beta spray. Believe me, I understand the urge. You want to help, or you want to show off, or you want to be the resident expert. It could be that you have great intentions and you really want to see that person succeed and progress in their climbing. I doubt it, but it's possible. Problem is, progression is about learning, but because of your spray, they likely didn't learn a damn thing. The more I coach climbers, the more I become aware of this fact. I've been guilty. When one of my partners is struggling, I'm always happy to help them work out what beta will be best for them. I very rarely offer up beta to anyone other than my closest partners, though it's happened, I'm sure. While I do try to always explain why the beta I'm suggesting is better, as well as my thought process in arriving at that conclusion, I'm still generally doing them a disservice by telling them in the first place. Of course, there are two types of beta sprayers, those with good intentions and those who just want to hear themselves sound smart. You know the latter. Ignore them. While the sprayers with good intentions might be more tolerable, they may also be harming you. One of the most important parts of the learning process is reflection. It's been said that we don't learn from experience, we learn from reflecting on experience, metacognition, thinking about our thinking. Too often we dole out beta that the climber isn't quite ready to understand. They might be 3 minutes from making the connection on their own, or they might be 3 years from it. Regardless, if we give them that beta and they can't sufficiently reflect on why it worked, what about it was better than the methods they had tried, and how to implement it further, then we've given them nothing. Less than nothing. We've set them back when they may have been so close to making the connection on their own and locking it down. In my coaching sessions, I still occasionally give beta. However, I now do it in a very specific way. I ask questions, or at most give positioning cues, and tell the climber every step of my mental process and coming up with that beta and why I thought it would work. I work backwards with them from the point of failure, asking questions as we go to find out what started the chain reaction that caused them to fall. More often than not, a week later I get a message saying, "I just used that new technique I learned to send a long-time project." If you're that person who gets flustered in 5 minutes and must ask for beta, then ask someone who can explain it and tell you why, rather than just tell you how they struggled up it as if there are no other options. And if you're the person giving the beta, the one with good intentions, take a second to decide if you're doing your friend a favor or depriving them of a valuable lesson, thereby stunning their growth. Your partners and significant others are likely to get frustrated when they stop getting the beta that they used to rely so heavily on. However, in a season or two, they'll thank you for it. When I asked you which one of these you wanted to do first, I was actually surprised you chose this one because it's out of order.
And I struggled with that.
I suspected you would just go in order just for the sake of being in order.
Going in order. I know, but it is the one I committed to first. So it's in that order.
I knew there was some sort of logic there. I wasn't sure what it was.
That was a battle.
Before we start, can you tell the people who you are? I'm going to kind of be throwing everybody into this situation where they get to tell people who they are. And since that's a thing I normally do. So
sure.
Tell the folks.
Okay. My name is Yasmeen Fowler. I lived in Cincinnati, Ohio for most of the time that I've been climbing, and now I'm in Knoxville, Tennessee. Been climbing since 2000, and let's see, I was on the board of directors for a while from about 2012 to 2017 for the Red River Gorge Climbers Coalition. Um, Other than that, I've just been climbing continuously for about 20 years, and I enjoy it.
Yeah, and I would say you're also my longest running client, one of my oldest and best friends, and just a generally certified badass. So that has to be added in there. I was excited that you chose this one because so many of my memories around this essay are tied to RockQuest. And, and that time that we spent in there. Was there an impetus for you choosing this one?
I think one of the impetuses was probably just the recent traffic it got on from one of your Instagram posts. So it was already just kind of, stewing in my mind based on that. Aside from that, interestingly, I think I know what you're talking about as far as some of the spray you probably heard at RockQuest.
But there was always a crew there that were like constantly running around just trying to spray beta at everybody, no matter whether they were a better climber than you or not. And to people that they knew were better climbers than them. They were just doing it incessantly and constantly.
Right.
And it drove me bonkers.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think I wrote this at that time.
I think you did too. Yeah. And the approach that I kind of took as I was just writing out some notes on it, I realized partway through, I was like, I should preface all this. Like, these tips only even apply to those who want to improve at not spraying. Like, maybe some people just want to keep spraying. So that's... Yeah,
there was a guy in that Instagram post last week that was like, this is antisocial. And I was like, well, only if your only means of being social is spraying unwanted beta at people.
Yeah. True. Yes.
And, maybe that's the case for some people.
That's true. I think the spraying is so different than the collaborating that you often get in gym situations, And so, if there's a crew that's just running around purely for the sake of hearing themselves talk, that's way different than just the fun collaboration you get sometimes more with bouldering.
And there's a real distinction that needs to be made between that kind of collaboration and just beta spraying.
Yeah.
And there's science actually that says if you're giving advice while someone is doing the thing, that can help their performance, but it can hurt their learning.
Yeah.
And then if you wait until after the fact, then that can help their learning, but obviously doesn't help their immediate performance because they're not performing at that moment. But
it makes sense. I mean, especially since I think it's a little overwhelming to hear it in the moment anyway, especially if you're on something that's difficult for you. You're already trying really hard and you're thinking about all the try hard. So that's probably not the best time to absorb new information anyway. I can't think of too many times where I've been mid-crux and been psyched to hear something. It's more like, okay, let me get to the rest before, so I can look up and think about things and then tell me, what I might want to know. And even like in the little collaboration circles
and you,
in the gyms,
you have this need to respond too.
Yeah. Yeah, so don't shout at me while I'm mid-crux because I'm going to stop and thank you and it's going to really mess it up.
That's one of my favorite things about you, actually, is that every time anyone says, good job, you're like, thanks, the whole time you're climbing. So I can only imagine what people spraying beta at you must feel like.
Do I have to tell them whether it worked or not? Like, I don't... or how good the beta was. I don't know. but yeah, I mean, the study that you just mentioned makes sense. Even in like the little collaboration circles in the gym, if I'm part of one, I try to wait until I see someone try a couple times and sit back down and then, be like, hey, how much do you want to know? Or even that feels a little too forward,
Yeah.
it's something like, have
Totally.
you tried other things, So much of it
Hmm.
feels too presumptuous, so I mean, typically I
Yeah, and
just
I think
kind
that's
of
the
wait.
thing. Like we can collaborate with each other, and that's a really great learning experience,
Yeah,
talking through your thought process with someone else is a big part of learning.
yeah,
But that person has to be open to it. And we don't know
yeah,
that if we just walk up to a situation and suddenly want to
exactly.
spray beta,
And suddenly want to
you
spray
know?
beta. Yeah, yeah. I mean, how well do you know the climber? How much of their
Yeah,
session have you been there for? Do you know what their goal is? Because I mean, limit boulders can look like flailing, or
totally.
sloth monkeys can look like unnecessary struggling, but but they might want that
Yeah.
struggle in the moment.
Yeah. And maybe they've done the problem with 5 different sets of beta
Yeah.
and they're trying a new strange set of beta that they
Yep.
imagined, You
Yeah.
have no idea what's going on in that situation.
Yeah.
As I'm curious because in my memories of RockQuest, when I
Mhm.
start thinking about beta spray, one of the things I always go to is I used to get the biggest kick out of watching guys, especially new climbers, come into the gym and
Mhm.
like target Melissa
I knew you were.
because she's cute and
And she's sweet.
she's
And
so
she.
sweet to everybody, and they just would flock straight to her and try to
Yeah.
tell her how to climb, not knowing
Yeah.
that she's a far better climber than they
Yeah.
are.
Yeah.
And
Exactly.
as one of the stronger women climbers around Cincinnati, did you get much of the like just beta spray from unwanted sources?
I'm trying to think. I feel like my situation was a little different. Like when I first started, there was just a smaller group of us, first at Climb Time and then at Rock Quest.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we were a little more invested in each other's success than just our appearances in looking
Yeah.
knowledgeable, maybe. Because I remember the first time someone told me about backstepping, and I was genuinely appreciative. I was like, oh, this is quickly
Right.
going to become my favorite technique. um, but but it was in that early stage where it's just nice to hear about just different options that you can put in your toolbox. Um, I
Mm-hmm.
don't I don't think that at Climb Time or Rock Quest I felt like barrages of unsolicited beta. I have experienced it in other gyms where maybe I just hadn't been frequenting them, and it was just kind of
Mm.
like I just stopped in and you know like on a business trip or just traveling or something like that.
Yeah.
Um, but typically, like, it's never been super aggro, and it's never been something that just like smiling and being like, "I'm good, thanks," hasn't put an end
Yeah.
to it.
Yeah.
And hopefully, no one's ever experienced beta that just can't be cut with just a simple request. It would be really weird if people just
Yeah.
kept on like, no, no, no,
You're
you
way
need to
better at
hear
it than I
this.
am.
Yeah,
You're way better at deflecting that stuff than I am.
yeah,
I could never just go, I'm good, thanks. As soon as I hear that, and I've only
yeah.
experienced this a handful of times, but
Hmm.
and it's always some random dude.
Hmm.
I immediately go to this place where, okay, now my mission is to embarrass you.
Yeah,
And I just can't help that. That's what happens.
yeah,
I think as I get older, I get better at not doing that, but
yeah,
definitely 10 years ago, that was
yeah,
my like go-to
yeah,
method. Like, okay, I know you can't do it the way you're telling me to do it. Why don't you show
You
me?
should ask. That's such a good
No.
point. I'm going to store that one away. I'm like, got it handy.
Yeah.
Yeah, I still don't understand what you're saying. Could you just show me a couple times?
Yeah, it's always extremely humorous for me when I say show me.
Yeah.
And then they can't even begin to try what they're telling me to do. And 9 times out of 10, that's the way it looks. You know?
Right.
It's always somebody who thinks they really understand it and they want to show their expertise, but they actually just don't get it at all. Yeah.
Well, and there have been a couple times in those situations with just, like suggestions coming at me where the person doesn't even necessarily say it's how they did it. They're like, well, I saw someone else doing it this way. And it's just, It's weird because maybe, I don't know, it's maybe they're saying that because the person they saw had, a closer body geometry to what I had. Who knows? But I think it's also worth, if you're about to suggest something, I mean, maybe stop for a moment and evaluate what about that person's behavior or appearance even makes them seem receptive, like do they, and so what did you interpret about their moment just now that made you feel like they wanted to hear the beta? I mean, I have friends who've just started wearing headphones to the gym because they're like, that way I don't hear, like the random this or that.
Yeah, I went to the grocery store yesterday, and while I was walking in, I was thinking about that I love wearing a mask in the grocery because I can also put a hood on and I can put headphones in and then no one talks to me. Knows. I'm like, this is perfect. I think it's really interesting that you got it more when you were traveling because I was thinking about this conversation earlier this morning and the word unassuming popped into my head. Like maybe Yasmeen is this unassuming good climber. But then I thought, what the fuck does that even mean? Why do we make the assumption that this person isn't a good climber? Because I don't know what a good climber looks like. I've seen all sorts of people that can climb circles around me that initially I would think, oh, that person's not a good climber. Right. Why is that in my head?
Yeah. I mean, we're making progress, but sexism still exists. And maybe a woman working on a sequence alone still seems more in need of beta than a man doing the same thing. I mean, even if it's not the case. And so maybe just all of that is why I've experienced it more while traveling rather than in gyms where it's friends collaborating and we know each other.
Yeah, I think there's this reaction that a lot of men have to hearing this conversation. And I've had it myself where I'm like, yeah, but I've been sprayed beta at too, and yes, it happens, but there's definitely a deeper rooted system that has taught men, whether we want it or not, we've been taught it. I've been taught it that we are the fixers. We are, we go in and we fix this situation for women. A good point. And that's not, it's not the truth. It's just what's been instilled in us.
Right.
Many of us.
Knight in shining armor and damsel in distress. And,
yeah. When you were talking about people saying, just random people giving you beta who may not even have done the problem or whatever, it reminded me of this moment. And I've had this moment multiple times with this person, actually. Natalie Hawley, right?
Yeah. Yep.
So Natalie, I think, is 4'11".
Okay.
And I've climbed with her quite a bit outside, and I have this really distinct memory of a time in Chattanooga at Stone Fort, and there was this guy climbing with us who but I'm not going to name names in this situation.
Yep.
And he kept giving her beta. He's like 6'2".
Yeah.
he kept spraying beta at her. And finally, at one point, she stopped climbing. Like she just drops off the boulder.
Yeah.
She's still facing the boulder. And then she spins around and goes, "You are no longer allowed to give me beta." And I was like, yes.
Yeah. 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 No, one of my good friends years ago, when she was getting a barrage of beta, this was just out at the red, just finally turned around and yelled down, "Who is climbing this route?" And it was like, yes.
That's perfect.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's amazing. And it's just I think what we need to do, and I'm guilty of this, I'm guilty of just making this like statement, black and white statement, like don't spray beta. But there is, like you said in the very beginning of this conversation, this line that kind of needs to be drawn of when is it this, community, cooperation, and when is it you just feeling like you want to show your expertise to this random stranger.
Yeah. And how much expertise is it really showing?
Right. Exactly.
Because what if your beta sucks and they fail?
And most of the time it does.
Yeah. Well, and I think like so many things, it can just be, the whole thing can be remedied just with better communication. I mean, just ask, that's, I think that's the simplest way. Like one of the things I'll do with friends, because I don't know, I really just don't feel like I offer beta to strangers unless they ask first. But with friends, if they're about to get on a route and they haven't been on it yet, I mean, maybe they're trying to on-site it. So I'll just ask, how much do you want to know? And often the answer is, I'll ask.
Yeah.
And I'm like, great, I am here, but I feel no need to like marionette you up this route if that's not the experience you're looking for. And
which you can do, which you are good at. You have marionetted me up.
Exactly.
up my hardest flash.
Yeah. And then as long as I've got my Google Doc with me, I am fine.
But imagine what that might have looked like to someone, new climber walking up to the cliff.
Yes.
And you're like laser pointer giving me every piece of beta as I'm climbing.
Yep. Yep.
And that like, could easily be.
You're going to make, and then this is how you're going to fix it.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. I think you're right. It's all about the communication.
It's just communication. And if you don't give beta in that moment to a stranger, what's the absolute worst thing that's going to happen? Are you trying to keep them from having a horrible fall on a top out, or are you really just trying to save them 10 minutes of experimenting with different body positions?
Right.
Like,
which ultimately could be a year's worth of learning.
Yeah, exactly. So even if your motivation is good, still take a second to evaluate it.
Totally. And that's, the Instagram post you referenced, that was one of the things I said you should be asking is this necessary? Do I need to do this?
What's going to happen?
No, probably not. In most cases, you don't.
Yeah. And I mean, if they ask, that's a totally different thing, because I feel like if
absolutely.
We're all adults here. If someone asks for beta, they've already gone through that, and they want it. So unless there's a really specific situation of, like you mentioned in the book, like as a coach, sometimes you withhold beta, and that in those situations it makes sense. But I think in most situations, if someone asks, then that resolves any internal conflict you have of like a bystander who might have some beta,
Yeah. And that's one of the things I struggled with a little in putting the book together was I wanted to take kind of a hard line on these essays, knowing that there's a lot of nuance here. There's a lot of subtlety that we have to, really dig into as humans and as partners and as friends and as strangers, and, communicate with people to find these nuances. Yeah. And I'm just taking this hard stance, like, don't fucking do this,
Well, because that hard stance at least gives people pause and makes them think about it. Even if they have to come up with arguments against your hard stance, they're still thinking about it. So
yeah. And I'm all about it. Argue with me. That's one of my favorite things to do. So
Exactly.
All right. Well, I appreciate you taking the time to chat with
Yeah.
me here.
Yeah.
And
That was fun.
I'm glad for you that, you don't get a ton of this, because I know there are some people who do. And if you're one of
Exactly.
those people listening who just feels like you always need to spray beta, I'm going to take the hard line here. Just fucking stop.
Yep.
All right. Thanks, Yaz.
Cool. Thanks, Chris. Talk to you later.
Tomorrow, how your friends are holding you back. We don't tweet, we scream like eagles.
This time, this time, this time, this time, this time to build. 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 This time, power, power. This time to build.